Hello, this is a history of my Messor angularis colony, the colony that arrived on 24th of September 2024. There was a queen and there were some 15 workers with her. They arrived in a test tube, but the next day I decided to put the test tube into a new setup that you can see here. Here is the test tube with the queen that I called Adimu. As she originates from Kenya, I decided to call her Adimu, which means rare or unique. At the beginning of October, they occupied the chambers of the gypsum nest. You can see the dry part of the nest with seed and some brood, and then the humid part of the nest with still some brood, but also quite humid. That is why I decided to move them in yet another setup after a few months. You will see Adimu, who is going to arrive just now here by the brood. Isn't she beautiful? I was feeding them the cricket jam, the dehydrated crickets that you can see here, and of course some seed. So in November I moved them into a new 3D setup that you can see here, and it is the situation in December. By the end of December there were already 55 workers, and here is the situation in July 2025. In July 2025, there were already 10 times more workers, some 550 workers. That was astonishing. In July, there were already 2 princesses. You can see one here to the left with wings, and that is quite amazing. Only a year after they arrived, less than a year, they already had alates, and that is something that is quite typical of this colony. You can see now the chamber where they produce the ant bread. They don't produce as much of ant bread as for example Messor capitatus or Messor barbarus, but they do produce it. They are also not very polymorphic. They are polymorphic, but the difference in size is not as big as by Messor barbarus or Messor capitatus. So they are Messors, but they are quite different and interesting. They also don't have their diapause. They just pass through the winter, and that is why their growth is so fast. They are really thriving in this setup. You can also see that there is quite a lot of brood, and that was comforting in July, because in June there was a heat in Rome. The temperatures were 31 degrees Celsius also in the setup, and I saw that that was too much for Messor angularis. In fact, I was absent for a week, and after a week I found some 100 dead workers. But the queen was fine, and there was a lot of brood, and as I said, it was quite comforting. So they don't manage the heat as well as Messor capitatus or Messor barbarus do. beautiful piles of eggs. I just love this colony. By September 2025, there were already some 930 workers and some 10 princesses. As I said, they don't need a diapause, but this last winter I decided to lower the temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius, so instead of having 26 or 27 degrees Celsius in the setup, I set it to 25 or 26 or overnight 24 degrees Celsius. That gave the opportunity to the queen, to Adimu, to take some rest. I also reduced proteins during the winter. It was only a month and a half of rest for her, but I suppose that was enough because she answered quite well after the winter. And the last September was probably the last time I really saw Adimu, because with so many alates that were multiplicating during the time, and some of them losing their wings, I couldn't tell the difference between Adimu and some of the princesses. So here you will be able to see the queen for maybe the last time. And she's here in the upper left angle of this chamber. And here is the situation by the end of March. You can see the whole setup, the whole nest. The lower three modules are dry. The upper, bigger module is moist. In the dry ones, they keep their seeds. There are a lot of alates, as you can see. And in the upper module, which is moist, there is a lot of brood. By the end of March, there were some 1,400 workers and 70 alates, or princesses. I think I can rightly say that this is quite a mature and nice colony. Although I cannot distinguish Adimu from all the princesses, seeing all that brood, I would say that she's doing fine. So, this was the history of my Messor angularis colony and their queen Adimu. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.